right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alejandra Senkiang. I am the director of the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement, and I am excited to be with Mayor Walsh as he makes this very exciting announcement today, along with our invaluable partners in both the legal and nonprofit fields. And they're going to give you all the information, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just wanted to first and foremost thank Mayor Walsh for his leadership on this issue. This has been a very active 7 months, I would say, an active 2.5 years, but definitely last 7 months, his leadership has been key for our office as we've navigated the waters. So today, as we release this RFP, we're going to start with Mayor Walsh, who's going to give a few remarks, and then one of our lead funders, the Himes Foundation, will be represented by Jocelyn Sargent, who will then be followed up by Georgia Katsoulomitis, who is the Executive Director of the Mass Law Reform Institute, followed by Emily Long, who is the staff attorney at MLRI, and last but not, what is this? Last but not least, sorry. I have an infant at home, so that's gonna be my excuse for the next 18 years, is Lonnie Powers, the Director of MLAC, the Mass Legal Assistance Corporation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alejandra, and thank you for what you do for us. I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. I want to thank all the speakers behind me today. I want to thank all the advocates that came here today. But most importantly, I want to give a shout out. There's some young people behind me that wanted to be here on their own. They work for our office, they work for neighborhood services, and they wanted to be part of this conversation. And some of them were here the day that we had a press conference in this very room when the president then came down with his executive order against immigrants, and they wanted to be here. And I think it's important that, and many of these people were in this room after the election and upset about the turnout of the election. I said, well, what we can do is do a couple of things. One is we can bury our head under a pillow for the next 4 years and hope that it's not that bad, or we can step up and fight back anything that might be bad. And these young people behind me and some around this room have done that, and I want to thank them and commend them for that. This is an important day for Boston, and in particularly Boston's immigrant families and for our entire city. Today, we reaffirm our commitment and compassion for making our immigrant system more fair here in this country. Today, I'm proud to announce the Greater Boston Immigrant Defense Fund. This is about keeping families together. This is about protecting children, and this is about keeping our workforce strong. Our country is certainly at a crossroads, and we're seeing that more and more every single day. But we have the opportunity to accomplish meaningful immigration reform in this country. But instead, we are choosing to use scare tactics every single day. They're injecting fear in our neighborhoods. They're inciting a witch hunt that wastes billions of dollars and do nothing to make our community safer. In Boston, we haven't and we don't accept that. We've made it clear that our immigrants are members of our community, and we respect and value them and respect and value their participation in our society. We also will not waste resources trying to tear families apart here in the city of Boston. We have more work to do, like making sure that this city is a city where everyone can thrive, where everyone can live and build a life that they imagined. I think that we're all used to and agree that this was the definition of the American dream at one point. Here in Boston, we still believe it is the American dream. We know where we stand. We stand with families of Boston, all families of Boston, regardless of where they come from. I'm very proud of the work that Alejandra Senkiang and her team at the Office of Immigrant Advancement has done. It's particularly since January 21st of this year, January 20th. Thank you. They work tirelessly to make sure that people of Boston understand that this is where families of immigrants can come to. When I took over as mayor of Boston, that office was called the Office of New Bostonians. And after a year ago, 2 years ago, we started to look around and say, okay, we are an Office of New Bostonians, but we're different than that. We're also an office of how do we advance immigrants? And that's where the name came, Immigrant Advancement came. And it's not for us to go backwards, it's us to go forwards. And again, I want to thank the work they've been doing. And the work they've been doing goes long before this president was sworn in, but long before the president was elected. So I want, again, thank you. Today we're taking the next step. The Greater Boston Immigrant Defense Fund has been in the works for many months. I'm proud of our Office of Immigrant Advancement, local advocates, the funders for working together on this groundbreaking initiative. Many of them are here. I can't give you all a shout out, and I apologize, but thank you for that. This program is privately funded. It will make lawyers available to people who have in proceedings at the Boston Immigration Court. It will support education efforts in the Greater Boston area. It will help us make sure that our neighbors don't have to go through the disruption, the pain, and the trauma of being deported unjustly. I'd just like to provide a little context to show how much good this will do here in the city of Boston. As I've said many times before, and I'm proud of the fact, 28% of our population in the city of Boston is foreign-born. Our history of immigration is the reason Boston is such a vibrant and culturally rich city. Immigrants, like my parents, literally built this city. Over the years, their contributions have grown. These are our neighbors, our friends, our co-workers, people who keep our city running. And the reality is many of them live in fear today, which is unfortunate. They're afraid what could happen to them or one of their loved ones. They're afraid of what could happen to their families. Nearly half of the children in Boston have at least one parent who is foreign-born. I am one of those kids. Every year, hundreds of children in Boston have a parent who is detained or deported. Many of these parents have legal grounds to stay in the United States of America, but there are no juries in these cases. Detainees don't have the rights to an attorney, and if they can't afford one, they almost always lose, and the family is ripped apart. Think about that. Every single year, hundreds of little kids in our city lose a parent because of a broken system. That's why we're so serious about this issue. Until Washington can accomplish meaningful immigration reform, Boston and all cities around the country are stepping up to do the right thing. It's no surprise that keeping families together is good for kids, but it goes further than that. Just look at the economic impacts. Taxpayers foot the bill when families lose a breadwinner and turn to public safety net programs. Taxpayers foot the bill when children lose a caregiver and have to go into foster care. And employers foot the bill when our workforce is disrupted. So clearly, it isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the smart, fiscally responsible thing to do. On behalf of the City of Boston, I'd like to thank the advocates who've been the champions of this issue. I'd like to thank the generous supporters who will sustain this initiative. Most of all, I'd like to thank Boston's immigrant families for guiding this initiative from the very start. This is a big step, and we're making sure we do this the right way. We're consulting with other cities around America that have launched successful legal defense funds, like New York City and Los Angeles. Together, we're standing up for people who have proven America was great when they arrived here and started to build a better life for their families. This has been an incredible response from the Boston funding community. So I want to thank them for stepping up, especially our corporate partners and all of the local funders, led by the Heinz Foundation, MLRI, and MLAC. And I just want to give a shout out of all of the employers that I called, and I called a lot of them. Not one person hesitated, and not one person said no to me. So I want to thank them for that. Serving as mayor of the City of Boston is an honor of my life, but I'm especially proud on these days like today when our community comes together to do the right thing. Now it's my honor to introduce Jocelyn Sargent of the Heinz Foundation, who will speak on behalf of the funding partners.
Thank you, Mayor Walsh, for hosting us today. It's indeed an honor to be here today to join the Mayor's Office and our public, private, and corporate funding partners to launch the Greater Boston Immigrant Defense Fund. Those partners include the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement, Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation, Massachusetts Law Reform Institute, the Barr Foundation, the Boston Foundation, the Klarman Foundation, the Fish Family Foundation, the Herman and Frida Miller Foundation, Grantmakers concerned with immigrants and refugees, and our corporate funders, Foley Hogg and Mintz Levin, among others. Last week, we all witnessed one of the most regressive immigration actions in the nation's history. The decision to terminate the DACA program is cruel, misguided, and devastating to the 100,000 dreamers and their families that call this country home. But this harsh act did not occur in isolation, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so very proud and honored to help lead this initiative. It's because of how forward-thinking the city of Boston is. This initiative has been in the making for quite some time now, and it's now needed more than ever. We're living in an age when xenophobia and hate crimes are on the rise, an age when minors fleeing violence in countries like Honduras are no longer granted temporary legal residence and are met by angry groups of adults that yell, "Go home." We're living in a time when our national government is trying to build a wall rather than build a bridge between us. So during this time, these actions we feel are an affront to our values that we hold as Bostonians, as Americans, and as civic leaders. And we will not stand by idly as our neighbors are forced to live in fear and uncertainty. Our role as government leaders, philanthropic leaders, and private sector leaders is to create a just, equitable, and prosperous life for all here. The Greater Boston Immigrant Defense Fund will provide approximately $1.4 million for local organizations working on immigrant rights and streamlining supportive services and emergency relief for these communities, including legal assistance and education. At the same time, the fund will allow us to build a powerful and agile network to be able to respond to the ongoing threats and rights and safety of the immigrants and refugees in our home. Boston has had a long history of successfully leveraging our collective skills to benefit communities in need. This fund just builds on that successful programs such as English for New Bostonians and the work of our local partners that we call our community partners that they do every day to make our communities safe and livable. I have no doubt that through this fund, we can continue our reputation as a sanctuary city for all. I would like to thank my staff at the Hyams Foundation, in particular Naid Torres, as well as our trustees and all our staff members that are 100% behind us and the communities and the philanthropic partners that have so graciously joined us in this effort. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mayor Walsh, thank you for hosting us. This is an incredibly exciting day in Massachusetts and the Massachusetts legal community, a day that has been 7 or 8 months in the making and took a great deal of collaboration and partnership among different sectors and different entities. My name is Georgia Katsalamidas. I'm the Executive Director of Mass Law Reform Institute, the statewide Poverty Law and Policy Center. I am joined here today by Iris Gomez, one of our immigration staff attorneys, and Emily Long, another of our immigration staff attorneys. Mass Law Reform is proud to partner with the Mayor's Office, our partner, the Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation, with all the funders and with the grantee programs to deliver justice to hundreds of immigrants in the greater Boston area. On behalf of all the legal aid programs and the community organizations that serve low-income and vulnerable immigrant communities, I want to express my sincere gratitude to you, Mayor Walsh, to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, and to all the funders who initiated this fund and were able to raise an impressive $1.4 million in a fairly short period of time. This speaks to the generosity of spirit of the greater Boston community and of the greater Boston business community, the law firms, and the foundation sector. As a first-generation immigrant, I'm the daughter of so many of you, poor immigrants who came to this country seeking a better life. I can speak to the importance that the American dream holds to all people that come to this country. The United States, for generations, indeed for over 300 years, has served as a beacon of hope, opportunity, and justice. And the city of Boston in particular, since the beginning, over 300 years, people have flocked to the city because it stood for something. The city of Boston and the Commonwealth have been really shining lights on the hill for so many years, and we are proud that the city remains and staunchly remains a welcoming city. And we thank you, Mayor Walsh, for standing up for our immigrant and refugee. So many others have said, we're in an era where xenophobia and hatred have entered the political dialogue and the conversation. And we need to stand up to it, because if we don't stand up to it, then we're no longer fulfilling our American values or living up to the potential of the American dream. So let me very briefly tell you what this means for the legal aid providers, and I will turn it over to the far more interesting Emily Long, who will tell you, who will share just an example of what legal representation means to low-income immigrants. Immigration law, for those of you in the room who know it and practice it.
Yeah,
Sure.
Do we lose them?
Can we just put our mics up there?
Yes.
It actually should be good right now.
Is it back on?
Yes.
All right, sorry.
Oh, no,
I
that's.
don't want to miss what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. I would never want anyone to miss what I'm saying. God forbid. Please. For those of you who know, immigration law is probably one of the most technical and complicated areas of law. Even for skilled attorneys who are not immigration practitioners, it's an area of law that's very difficult to navigate. So for low-income immigrants who are unable to obtain legal representation, they are losing their right and their ability to seek remedies and relief that could be afforded to them. With this fund, attorneys and community-based organizations will partner up, and they will provide representation to some of our most vulnerable indigent low-income immigrants in Greater Boston. This is such a significant moment because we have been talking about this need for a very long time. So I want to turn this over to Emily Long, and I just want to finish by saying that this fund really does deliver on a core American value and a fundamental promise of our country, the promise of justice. That's a great gift that all of the funders are providing to thousands of people in Massachusetts today. I thank you again.
I'm very short, even in my tall heels. Thank you for that introduction, Georgia. I will try to live up to that. And thank you, Mayor Walsh, for inviting us here today and announcing this wonderful initiative for our city. I really want to just take this opportunity to emphasize, as a legal aid lawyer who has spent a lot of time representing low-income immigrant communities, how critical representation is to success. I think it's a concept that we all understand, but to really put some numbers on that, in terms of nationally, only 37% of people are represented in immigration court proceedings. For detained immigrants, that number is 14%. And if you're asking what the difference is between representation and no representation, you could be up to 5 times more likely to win your case if you have a lawyer. And that's for people who have access to a relief that is available under the law that they're legally entitled to, that they cannot access just for lack of funds or lack of resources. And so that's really what we're here today, to provide more resources to immigrant communities that are hurting, especially right now in this moment. So I wanted to share a quick client story to demonstrate why legal representation is so important for our immigrant communities. I met a client 1 week before she had an immigration interview scheduled. She had a U.S. citizen child and a U.S. citizen spouse, and they had done what they needed to do, which they had started their process. They had filed paperwork together, they were waiting for their interview, they were hoping that she would be able to get her green card and have legal status here in the U.S., which was what she would be entitled to and is what the process requires. Unfortunately, while they were waiting for their interview, their relationship started to deteriorate. Her husband became verbally abusive, and he eventually physically assaulted her. Lucky for her, she was a very strong person. She called the police, she got a restraining order, and she tried to pick up the pieces and figure out what to do next in her life. She was referred to DV counseling, and her counselor referred her to talk to me. I met her just 1 week before she had to meet with immigration, and she was very scared. She didn't know if she should go, she didn't know if she should not go, she didn't know if she should try and contact her husband, because it said that they needed to go together to that interview because they had applied together. So luckily, I was able to meet with her and talk to her about her options and let her know that she was eligible for protection under the Violence Against Women's Act, and that she would be able to file her own petition because of the domestic violence that she suffered. So we went together to that interview, and we told immigration that she would file a new petition based on that domestic violence. And today, she has her green card, and she is out of that abusive relationship, and she is supporting herself and her son. Without help of an attorney, without intervention, she would have been in danger of deportation, even though she had a valid legal claim to stay in the United States. And that's true for so many of our unrepresented immigrant clients who are in front of immigration court, who are detained, or who just are in front of immigration services. As Georgia discussed, immigration law is incredibly complex and difficult, and that's really why representation is critical in this area. So that client example is just one example of hundreds that my colleagues have stories of every day, that our community partners know these stories of how critical representation is. People with attorneys are more likely to get released from detention, are more likely to apply for relief, and are more likely to succeed in getting that relief. And that's relief that they're entitled to under the law, but they otherwise would not be able to access. So this is an amazing initiative that has been announced, and I know that all of our partners, all of my colleagues, are so happy to have more resources for our immigrant communities. Success in an immigration case not only impacts that individual, it impacts their family, it impacts the immigrant community and our community and state as a whole. So this is a really important initiative, and it's vital for us to support our immigrant community in these really difficult times. Thank you. And I forgot to hand it over to Lonnie from MLAC.
Thank you, Mayor Walsh, for your leadership in organizing this Greater Boston Immigration Defense Fund. The Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation, and I'm Lonnie Powers, the Executive Director, is honored to partner with the city and with many of the leading foundations in Boston and other funders to bring this dream of the fund to life. It is quite fitting that MLAC is involved with this partnership because civil legal aid started in this country in the 19th century because immigrants were being exploited when they got off the ships from Europe and other places. And it was out of the need to treat those people decently that the New York Legal Aid Society arose, and later the Boston Legal Aid Society. 34 years ago, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts created the Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation to provide support for civil legal aid to, quote, any indigent person who is a resident of the Commonwealth. Civil legal aid in Massachusetts is open to all eligible residents, no matter how new or old their residency, no matter where they were born, no matter their color or their creed. Being a partner in the Immigrant Defense Fund is not only consistent with the reason why MLAC was created, but it also advances our vision that MLAC will work with all participants in the civil legal aid system to move forward together with particular emphasis on addressing economic inequality, institutional racism, implicit bias, and other causes of poverty. Now, I would not honor my own tradition as the son and grandson of Baptist ministers if I didn't try to take up a collection. The Immigration Defense Fund is accepting donations. We have, as you've heard, there's a target, but as you've also heard, there's much more need than can be met with what has been pledged and what has been contributed. You can make donations through MLAC's website, mlac.org, or call us and we'll figure out how to take your money. Thank you for being here, and thank you again, Mayor Walsh and the funders, for putting this fund together.
Before we take any questions, I just want to clear the record. Everyone came up here and thanked me. It's not about me. It's all the people in this room that did this. That there's not one person in this Eagle room that took the lead. It was all of us collectively. So, thank you. Any questions for anybody here that you want to ask on anything?
How are you going to pick the organizations that are going to get the money?
Well, with the individuals, right? It's more the. How are we going to pick the? It's more the people.
It's
because this goes all the
Today, a request for proposals will be issued to nonprofit organizations that are seeking grants from the fund. Those organizations will provide either direct legal representation or advice and assistance through community-based organizations. And those legal aid organizations will select which clients they're able to represent. That's how it's going to work.
And I'm also working with the consul generals of the different countries to pick up the tab with their countries. So, for example, Mexico, myself and the Mexican consul general, he was in a meeting here, and he's going to pick up the expenses for any Mexican people that need help through the legal system. So, again, it really is about asking other consulates as well. I see Ireland's here. We should probably ask Ireland to pick up the tab. They have it, and I will. But to help their own, so this fund can be used so it doesn't get depleted that quickly.
Are you going to keep with the normal legal help for the people that you're having at the city of Boston? I know that you're having like one Monday, the first Monday of the month on Wednesday, the third Monday.
We're gonna still do our clinics. That's separate. That's a separate issue. We run those clinics through the city of Boston. We're going to continue to run those clinics, the legal educational clinics. We're going to continue to do that. Anything else?
I have a question for Ms. Long. Could you repeat the number of people that are represented legally versus the ones that are not represented?
So the national numbers on representation, 37% of people overall are represented in immigration court in proceedings, but detained clients are only represented at the rate of 14%.
The process again?
So the effect of that on the process could be astronomical. It obviously varies case by case, but in terms of generally, there was a 5-year review of over 1.2 million cases, and they found that for release from detention, excuse me, in terms of your probability of being released from detention is 4 times more likely if you're represented, and your probability of success on your case is up to 5 times more likely if you're represented.
Last question.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Thank you. Have a vacation.